So what have I been reading this week? I'll talk about what I've read in both fiction and RPGs, and then I'll probably have a very simple TBR. I don't think I've got any books this week, so there's certainly no book haul. The first thing I have read this week, or the first thing I'll mention, is I finished a chapter of The Railway Children by E. Nesbitt with my kids. This is the book I read. Their mama reads something different with them. I read this one, and I really like Nesbitt. I really like the Samiad books. This is very different in tone to the Samiad books, the Five Children in It series. This is much more serious in tone, much more sentimental. But I enjoy it. It does seem to be mostly about the railway children saving the day and rescuing people and helping people. It's very much a not even a kids' adventure book, where the Samiad books maybe are kids' adventure books, strictly speaking. It's more sort of kids doing good deed books. I have also read a few chapters of this, The Complete Tales of Lovecraft, and by chapters, sorry, I mean stories. I'm reading this slower than I thought I would. I really like Lovecraft on the whole, and I thought I'd get through it, but partly it's reading certain smaller stories or slice stories that can give a bitty feeling when you're into one of the novellas or one of the longer short stories. Obviously there is a degree of coherence where you're like, oh yeah, I want to find out what happens, whereas here you sometimes finish something, you're like, I'm just going to switch to another book now. I finished a story, I liked it, I'll move to something else. That will probably be a priority this week coming up. The priorities this past week, both of which I've nearly finished, are 1, Lord of the Hollow Dark by Russell Kirk. There we go, without glare. It was his third novel, not quite his last piece of fiction. He published a few bits of fiction in the 80s. I've reviewed his short stories on this channel. He's a ghost story writer chiefly, and this was the last novel he wrote, and it kind of ties together some of the earlier stories and ideas he'd brought up. It's also very different to his short stories. I'm really enjoying how different in style it is. There are some issues, just like you'd expect with any book, but yeah, recommended by Robert Bloch, author of Psycho, and Don Heron, co-editor of The Romantist, who was also really appreciated and supported by Madeleine L'Engle and Ray Bradbury. But yeah, I've enjoyed that, and I am over 2/3 of the way through. I may finish that today. It's short enough, really. I mean, 80 pages or something may be enough to just power through. The other book that I have made good progress on this week, after being slow for a while, is Dune, the original one. This is the whole trilogy, so the original one is, whatever that is, about half of it. And I am well into book 2, Muad'Dib, now, and I've really enjoyed it. I mean, it's a reread, so in one sense I'm not massively surprised by it. All the twists and turns, man. But then again, Herbert doesn't really do twists and turns. He doesn't set stuff up so that, wow, you never expected that to happen. There are moments like that, but on the whole, he says out loud, by the way, this is what's going to happen. Or this is what all these characters are thinking and planning. And I think that's really interesting as a technique. I don't think it's at all a problem. I really enjoy it. Muad'Dib, the second book, has our hero sort of begin his real messianic journey, which is a major theme. Hence why the third book is called Dune, or the second book is called Dune Messiah. It's a story at some level about messianism and the destiny of the human race and lots of other things. Really enjoying that. And again, if I don't finish that today, I may finish it tomorrow. And then finally, RPG reading wise, I'm most of the way through Vault of the Drow, D3, and again, probably I may even finish that today, but certainly probably in the next day or two, and I'll be reviewing that next week. This week I will be putting up an RPG review of Isle of the Plangent Mage, which I finished a few weeks ago, which is a more modern one. That is not retro, that is brand new. This is retro. This is maybe the module of Gary Gygax's I've enjoyed most. It's hard to say because I have a lot of time for T1 and indeed T1 to 4 as a whole, but I think there's a complete conception in D3 that is executed very well and completely. I don't know if I'll review Q1 as well, which comes afterward, which was outlined by Gygax, but then actually written by someone else. But anyway, there we are. So yeah, for the next week, I guess those are more or less the priorities, but which will be nice. It'll be satisfying to finish probably 2 books plus a pamphlet, I guess, in terms of the adventure. Then plough on with Lovecraft and probably pick up something else. Maybe Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty would be a good idea. Maybe The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. Maybe even, I don't know, there's a few other books on the kind of, I want to read this in the next month or so. So Kim Stanley Robinson, William Gibson, books by those guys. So we'll see. But yes, big week ahead for completion. What have you been reading? What have you been hauling? What have you been planning to read? And if you're reading Dune with the movie coming out, what have you thought so far? Tell me in the comments, and I'll see you next time.